Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight. I'm super excited about tonight's show. We have a phenomenal guest with us this evening. One of my heroes, someone I have looked up to my entire career, looking so forward to talking with Eugene Migliaro Corporon. It's going to be a fantastic evening. We're going to bring him on in a few minutes and talk about his life, what the steps he took to get here, the influence that he has had on our band community, which is a significant impact. Really looking forward to kind of digging in, talking to him about his career, some of his ideas about music and conducting, and sharing that with everybody tonight. Before we get started, I do want to give a special thank you to Josh Savanovich, a dear friend of mine here in Hillsborough, North Carolina, teaches in Orange County at Cedar Ridge High School. He is helping us out tonight, and I just want to say thank you to him. Coming up, we're hoping that this will be a series that we start developing to kind of recognize some of the people who have had some major impacts. So tonight we've got Professor Corporon joining us tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, we are going to be talking with another legend in the band community, Alfred Watkins. So definitely tune in for that. Same time, 2 weeks from tonight. Really looking forward to that conversation. Before we get started, just wanted to talk about some of the highlights of things that are happening in the band community. And Josh, why don't you join us for a few minutes?
Oh, it would be my pleasure. I'm awesome. Sorry that I'm not the special guest to everybody. I'm the side guest for now. So, but it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for helping make this run smoothly. We were talking about some of the big things that are happening in the news right now. We were talking before this came on, and I was really super excited to see the reprint of an old Francis Macbeth article from 1990. It is in the Instrumentalist right now, and just want to make sure everybody keeps an eye out for that. A lot of us band directors wind up subscribing to the Instrumentalist, so check that article out. It is a classic, and actually in the pre-show conversation, Eugene, Josh, and I were talking about that article, and it's just one of those articles that kind of stands out. So definitely check out this month's Instrumentalist magazine. Josh, you had a couple things that you wanted to kind of highlight in the band community.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to just mention, and I'm sure I was not alone last week driving home, and on Thursday when they announced that Chick Corea's family had shared that he had passed away.
Yeah.
From what I understand, was a pretty aggressive battle with cancer. And as musicians and band directors, jazz musicians, Chick Corea has been extremely influential. I've been talking about him to my students a lot the last few days, and you and I were chatting about back in 2018. I got to take members of the band to New York, and we got to see Chick Corea play with the Jazz at Lincoln Center on one of their evenings of playing the Chick Plays Monk concerts. And it was just it was inspiring to listen to him play, but he was so down to earth, so genuine. He was talking about Monk the way that we talk about Chick Corea,
right?
Just lauding him and speaking in awe of his compositional and improvisational talents. And I just remember thinking, that's how I feel about you.
Amazing. Yeah, it's always amazing to be able to talk to one of those legends in the music community, and just to get to know them as a person, which is the driving force behind this series that we're trying to do with the Maestro Moments. Is just to find these heroes that we have in our lives, and get to know them as the human beings that they are, as the real people that they are. Just get to see the other side of them, the softer side, the genuine side of them. So, but most definitely. So we are in the middle of the pandemic. And so I know here in North Carolina, where you and I teach, we don't have our assessments, our MPAs, they just aren't happening. And I have a great relationship with the folks at US Bands. I've judged for them in the past, and they've actually started up a virtual series. They did a virtual series in the fall with the marching band, and this spring they're doing the same thing with concert, jazz, percussion. they mentioned something about possibly doing some marching band stuff also coming up. But if you are a band director looking for some assessment for what you are doing right now, because assessment, getting that feedback on what we're doing in the classroom is so important. This is a great resource. It's very reasonably priced. You upload everything. You get some great comments and feedback from some really great adjudicators, reinforcing the things that you're covering in class and identifying some things that we can make better. So great program there. Just wanted to point that out to everybody. And speaking of COVID, that's been on the mind of everybody. So Mark Speed has kind of been leading that huge study on the aerosols and all that other stuff. And a lot of great things are coming out of that study. A lot of positive things, just showing us that it's okay for us to come together and to start making some music in a safe way. We can start moving forward. And Josh, you and I were talking about this earlier this week. You actually came across another article that was just kind of separate study, but was reinforcing these things, right?
Yeah, and in the county where Aaron and I teach, this is much like the rest of the country right now. The how to band safely while in a time of COVID is at the forefront of everyone's conversation. And this popped up on a band director group on Facebook. And it was the published from October, the study, but I didn't notice it until recently. But it's by and large, it's reinforcing a lot of what we understand and know about how wind instruments create these aerosols, how they can be mitigated using proper PPE and distancing and bell covers. And this article is really interesting because one of the things they did is they sort of rate instruments on almost like a scale of the smallest potential for I don't want to say danger, but for the spread of aerosols to be more concerned. And it's a lot of good information, and a big takeaway is that they are hoping that other folks will use this study to create best practices and other strategies so that musicians can get back into rehearsal halls and we can keep making music and be together again. This is the first collaboration the University of Minnesota has actually had with the Minnesota Orchestra, from what I read, and it's really interesting just how fast the scientific community has paired with the music community to try to find ways to get us back, because I think we all realize how much we miss art and music. And so this is a great article. You can find the link if you want to read the specific. I've never looked at so many graphs and charts about aerosols before, and it's still way over my head. I'm a percussionist, if you didn't know me, guys. And so, all this science stuff is far beyond me. But if you're interested in looking at it, you can go to the Journal of Aerosol Science, and the title of it is Aerosol Generation from Different Wind Instruments. So again, guys, just, we make ourselves as educated as we can about this, and then, we move forward. Yeah.
And, just changing gears a little bit, something that's been in the headlines this week is our friends in Texas, and we definitely want to keep them in our thoughts, our prayers. They are suffering right now. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and all my Texas band director friends, just know that I'm thinking of you. I wish I was there to help in any way that I can, but just really thinking about all of you guys and praying for your safety and hoping that you guys will be getting back into the classroom soon and making some beautiful music. All right, so these things would not be possible without the support of Amano Music. Amano Music is kind of the driving force behind WindConductor. We have a short little spot for Amano Music, and right after that, we're going to bring on Eugene Corporon. WindConductor.org's Maestro Moments is brought to you tonight through the support of Amano Music. Amano Music is a collective for composers and a resource to band directors. Find the very best in wind band repertoire, from classic marches updated and edited for contemporary wind ensembles to the latest from innovative independent composers like the piece you're listening to right now, Chatterbox by Jason McChristian. You will also find resources for the band classroom, including books on topics important to band directors, as well as methods like mastering the scales to prepare your band to tackle rigorous repertoire. You can find Amano Music by visiting their website at www.amanomusic.com. That's Amano Music with a double A. right. And without any further ado, I am so honored and privileged to introduce you tonight to Professor Maestro Eugene Corporon. Maestro, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So I wanted to start tonight, as a band director, you've had a tremendous influence on my life. And, we really have not gotten to know each other. You and I don't know each other very well. I've just kind of read your resources. I've listened to so many of your recordings. And I just wanted to kind of dig in a little bit and find out a little bit more about who you are. So tonight, maybe we could just start with talking about your journey to being where you are today, which is
yeah. I was an early band geek. I decided in junior high school, based on the fact that I had a wonderful junior high school conductor, that I wanted to be a band director. And pretty much in 7th grade. And I stayed on that track pretty straight all the way through junior high and high school and college, almost in college. It was interesting because I'd had nothing but great experiences in my public school music, had great teachers and great models, and turned out the same teacher. And my junior high band director ended up being my high school band director, ended up being one of my college conductors. But so when I got to college, I signed up as a music ed major, and we had a program at Cal State Long Beach out in California to be a Band-Aid. I always loved that. We were Band-Aids. So they stuck us on band programs, and you got a freshman year experience going out and working in the classroom. And I did that. I went to Long Beach Jordan High School my freshman year, first semester, to help teach. It was the worst experience of my life. It was a poorly run program. It was a mess. It was awful. I got instructions when I was on the podium, like, the one thing you got to know is you never stop. You never stop to talk to them because it becomes a discipline problem. So just line up all the music you're going to play and just keep going.
Wow.
And I thought, this surely can't be the way this is supposed to work. I had experienced nothing but wonderful programs up to that point. So I came back after that experience and changed my major to performance, and finished my college career as a performance major, with a plan at the end of my senior year to go to Juilliard to study clarinet with Joe Allard. And several of my friends in school had gone there, and that's where I was going. It was all set, and Joe had accepted me in his studio. And then I got offered, I have to say, one of the best teaching jobs in the state of California in my old high school district. And I was presented with a crisis. So I said, I had taught there in the summers, taught woodwinds through college for them. And they said, well, we want you to come down and just look at the job. And I said, no, I'm going to be a clarinet player. I'm going to play in an orchestra. And I went down, interviewed for the job. Still wasn't sure I was interested. But funny enough, talk about how things come around. I had to go to the superintendent's office up on the hill to meet with the assistant superintendent, my last part of my interview. And I was sitting waiting for her to be available, and she walked out, and she said, Gene, how are you? It's great to see you again. It was my vice principal from high school.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah.
And she remembered me from high school because I was so active in my high school program. So that was the person I had to interview with. So I had a pretty good chance of getting the job. So I went through a couple of weeks of really deep consideration. And if it hadn't been for my clarinet teacher, Larry Maxey, and my conductor, Robert Reynolds, and Don Wilcox, the three of them all helped me to make a decision to go into teaching. And I never regretted it. I'm so glad I did it. what Larry said to me was probably the best advice at the time. He said, I've noticed you like to work with groups of people. I've watched you through your college career. Whenever there's a chance to conduct, you raise your hand. You like working with big groups or chamber groups. He said, you know how our life is as a clarinetist. You lock yourself in a room, spend most of your time alone. You go play a concert, you go back in the room. He said, I think you work well with people. And I took his advice, and I've always been thankful for him pointing that out to me and helping me. So that's how I got in. I taught public school for 2 years, taught at Mount McGill High School in Southern California, Spring Valley. I was the director of instrumental music. I taught the jazz ensemble and all the bands and both orchestras. And whatever else came up, chamber music, coaching. And then I jumped to college teaching at Cal State Fullerton without a master's degree. I was pretty lucky.
So now how did that come about? How did you get, because, today in 2021, most colleges won't look at you without a doctorate,
Oh, I know. Well, there again, you never know. You just never know. Who's going to come back around into your life. I tell this to my students all the time. Look around. You could be sitting next to somebody who will change your life.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. They could be on the next committee that looks at you for a job. So
right.
If they're out in front of you, they might be at the high school district that's looking for new conductors, and they're considering you. So you're writing your resume every day.
Yeah.
But it turned out
that's I want to hang on that because
Sure.
Here I am. I said it earlier. I'm talking to one of my heroes, and that bit of advice is so important. That you just said you're writing your resume every day, and I know that in my career I have made a lot of dumb mistakes. I've probably burned a couple bridges here and there, but it's so important to really treat everybody with respect that you come across, and just to show love to everybody. And I love what you were saying, and to always strive to be your best at every moment. So I just wanted to highlight that little nugget of wonderful information that you shared.
Yeah, it's so important. I know a great high school band director in Madison, Wisconsin, when I taught there, was a man named John Rafeth. He's retired now, but he had the best band in town the year that Bob Reynolds got to the university, and the year later that I came as an assistant. Phenomenal program at Madison West High School. Best marching band, best concert band. And he used to say to his freshman class, he'd get them all in a room and he'd say, my main theory is I can't hold you responsible for something I haven't taught you. So rather than get mad at you, I want to make sure I teach you.
Yeah.
And they'd all sit there and nod, and he'd say, 4 years from now, you're going to ask me to write a letter for you to go to college. Here's what I'd like to be able to say about you. You were on time. You were friendly. You worked well with others. And he just listed,
Yeah.
so that the freshman had all that information up front.
Right
to
at the
this
beginning.
day, I do the same thing with members of my ensemble. Here's what I'd like to be able to say about you in 2 years when you ask me to write that letter for Eastman or to teach at University of Wisconsin or wherever you want to go next. So
right.
But the college thing came about again from one of my earlier teachers, someone I had known since third grade. I used to play in the summer band program, and I was terrified of him because he was such a major figure, In fact, to the point, I told him this once, when he would come into the room, he used a lot of his high school students to help teach the young kids, the third graders that were there. And when I heard he was coming to hear the class, I hid under the piano. I was so afraid of him. But I later worked with him, and he offered me a job at Cal State Fullerton. He had invited my high school clarinet choir that I conducted as a senior to be on one of his concerts at another high school because he heard us at a solo and ensemble festival. And so he offered me the job. They offered me the job, and I took it. His one piece of advice was, and I would give this piece of advice to anyone looking into college teaching first year. He said, whatever they ask you to do, say you can do it.
Right.
And then if you can't do it, learn how to do it before the job
Right.
starts.
That's also good advice, especially in
Yeah.
today's market. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Cal State Fullerton, was that? Did you get into recording while you were there, or because
I made
your
one-
discography is immense. I mean, there's very few other band conductors that I can kind of point to with the number of albums and professional recordings that you've done. So, I mean, when did all that start?
Well, I realized the value of it for my students and for myself early on. I was on a couple of junior high records. You remember those vinyl round donuts? And Century Recording out in California would come around and record your group. And I remember 2 solos I had in junior high orchestra: Turkish March of Beethoven and Promenade on the Great Gate of Kiev, the clarinet solo.
Okay.
And I have a record of it still, of me playing on that recording. And it was valuable. It helped me hear myself, get outside of myself, and evaluate. And then in high school, we did the same kinds of things. So LPs. And my first year teaching, we did the same thing. In fact, I'm in the process. There's a Mount McGill High School Alumni Association, and I'm having the sound studio at North Texas digitize the 2 albums we did while I was there. The
Oh, wow.
Jazz Ensemble Orchestra Band. And I'm going to send it to them and let them, because they're all talking about, remember the day we played Suite Française or Lincolnshire Posy, or, sure like to hear that recording. I went online with them and I said, well, guess what? I can get it to you. So we're working on it. So throughout and Cal State Long Beach with Bob, we made several recordings right along the way, coached by Aaron Copeland, coached by Darius Mio, coached by Mark Harris. They would all visit the campus because we were in LA. We never got Stravinsky, but he was just about 50 miles away. But anyway, so I got a feeling for the value of that as a player. So at Cal State Fullerton, I did 1 recording. I had the second and third band, not the first band. And then I went to Wisconsin for a year as the assistant, and then took over the director of the wind side of the program when Bob went to Michigan. That was a real tough time because I went there to study more with Bob Reynolds, and he left, darn it. And I ended up staying 3 more years and doing his job, doing the job. Right. And then left. But we laid down a couple of records at Wisconsin, and then I really got into it at Northern Colorado. That series of LPs.
Yeah. And in looking up the the discography, that's kind of the earliest ones that I was finding was the Northern Colorado stuff. Right. So in the recording, what were some of the goals that you had while recording your band? Like, was it to have this recording, or was it? What was the thought process behind it? I mean, you mentioned that it was a great way to truly evaluate your ensemble, because when we're standing there in front of our band, we've got a million things running through our minds. We're trying to pull out everything, and to step back and hear that recording is important. But what was kind of the motivation behind developing that?
Well, one, I always believed it was great for our students. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't still do it if I didn't believe it was beneficial to their education.
Right.
But it's like the world's best judging panel. And by that, I mean, you've worked, we all do it. We work very hard, and then we bring somebody in to give us to mirror what we've done and say, well, you've missed this, or you didn't catch that, or gosh, that's awfully loud there. And so you get some input and you adjust what you're doing. Well, it's like that, only it's in real time. So There's a little red light in front of you. And if it sucks, the producer turns the light off and says, we got to do that again.
Right.
Sometimes there'll be discussions. I've been fortunate to have Jack Stamp as my producer these many years, and actually for almost 25 years now. and
Wow.
Bruce League as my engineer. And they know the sound that we can make. They know the sound, doesn't matter what school we're at. They know the sound we can make. They know the sound that I want to make. And if we're not making it, they're really honest with me about it. So that's one side of it. You get instant input. So do the players in a nice way. And Jack would only say you suck if he was talking to me personally. He'd never say it to the band. but you really get it. What I love about it is you get a chance to do your very best work and to not leave it until you've gotten the best that you can get, given the time you have.
Yeah.
And it's like a great rehearsal. You know, when we work on something and it comes out right, we go, that's it. Okay, we've got that worked out, and you move on. So I really enjoy the challenge of us getting to do our very best. And I want to say something about this, because people will talk about live recording or live performance versus recording. Every recording session I've been in, everybody is alive.
Right.
And they are on the edge of their chair, and they are working to do their absolute best. And if you don't play it, it can't be on the CD.
Right.
So, you know, they can't make it happen. So every time I hear a great recording, I just sit back and go, boy, I know how hard those folks must have worked to make that happen. Because no one can create it in the sound studio. Even in today's studio where people do multi-miking, we do live to 2-track. And we set up the ears in the concert hall, and that's how we play. So it's funny, when I'm leaving the building in the spring and I walk by the leader of the 1 O'Clock Lab Band, Neil, and I used to have this talk. He'd say, well, when are you going out to mix your recording? I said, man, it's already mixed. We mixed it at the recording section. Whatever we played is what we got. Meanwhile, 1 o'clock, every player's in a microphone. They go out to LA and mix it in a studio. It's a whole different concept.
Sure.
Still great recordings, but just different.
Yeah.
So it's a real love of mine, and I look forward to it, and my students do. They like having that opportunity to make the composer smile.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I've loved about your recordings is the programming that you put into every recording that you put together. Even when it's you've got those GIA recordings with where you're featuring a particular composer. I love the way that you select the pieces for those composers. And then when you have something like Altered States, which is one of my favorite recordings that you put out, you've got this blend of the traditional as well as the new. And so I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit about, and you've been instrumental with a lot of the studies with really identifying the artistic music within the band community, and finding those gems and those nuggets to talk about. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about maybe your thought process when it comes to like programming for your bands, whether it's for a recording, whether it's for a live performance.
Yeah. I usually build my programs by the year, and quite frankly, I start with the end of the year, because whatever we play on the last concert is what we usually record, or last two. We might go back and pick something up. Our rehearsal schedule is usually, if we've got a healthy one, it's 10 rehearsals. We rehearse twice a week. Sometimes we have to do our concerts on 8. Just depends on the way the hall works out and the rotation getting on stage. But I'll set up those last 2 concerts knowing I'm going to pick from those to do to put onto a disc. And so that's most of the time the new music. I mean, we started out wanting to record things that weren't recorded. So as lovely as the whole first suite is, there were several unbelievably great recordings of that. So we stayed away from it for a long time. Same with, all the British band classics, or Persichetti, or, wonderful, wonderful music. But you have, starting with Eastman and forward, Eastman, Illinois, Michigan, you have all these places that have done great recordings, Cornell. So we highlighted contemporary American music was the idea. and stay mostly with Americans. Now that branched out after 25 years, 26 years of that. We've been able to go back and put them together a little differently. But even within that, there can be new music that still sounds, still is very, reaches out to a broader audience. I mean, a Frank Kelly piece reaches out to lots of people. A John Mackey piece reaches out to lots of people. If you're doing something by Mario Davidovsky, maybe not, so you might do one of those every couple of years just because it deserves to be on the recording, even though it's a little challenging to listen to it. But you're right. The idea was to say to people, the wind band is a serious artistic medium that has its own repertoire, and that deserves to continue in music history, because who else would play this wonderful music?
Right.
Who else is going to play Husa or Grantham, or
Right.
Doherty or McTee, or who's going to play that music if we don't? So it's important to Kelly, Mackey. I mean, it's really important. Giroux, it's really important. So one of my favorite sayings is, the band won't find its future in the orchestra's past.
No.
I mean, transcriptions were necessary when we started and are still necessary. I mean, I play transcriptions, absolutely, but I probably wouldn't record one unless it was a version offered by the composer.
Right. Well,
and that's happening, by the way, more and more. We get a wind piece written like Prague by Husa, and then the Chicago Symphony asks him to write it for the orchestra. So it's happening in reverse. So sometimes we do share the same piece of art, and the composer themselves are the ones who make both versions.
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. And on that about finding our path outside of the orchestra, I got an email from David Whitwell trying to find would love to get him on here, but he sent me a copy of the speech he gave in Spain last year. And it opens up with, if you go before the 16th century, the musicians of the court were actually wind players. So, I mean, we have a rich, long tradition of great classical music to contribute, and finding our path forward. We need to really own that history, own that tradition, and then find that path moving forward. And that's one of the things that I love about your recordings, is that you have highlighted so many of these great composers of our time that are doing some phenomenal things. You mentioned Michael Doherty, and I'm showing my fanboyness right here. One of my friends actually got me the album and had both you and Michael sign it for me. So a little bit of fanboyness going on right there. So, those recordings were highly influential in my life, going to those that you recorded. But also, I think one of the biggest contributions to the field of music education is the series that you did with GIA, the Teaching Music Through Performance and Band series. So Volume 1 came out, and it was just, it flew off the shelves by band directors, because you had these great recordings, and then you had this book that you could read about the music, learn ways that you could stylize your rehearsals and focus on things. It was just such a great resource. So tell us how that actually came about.
Sure, happy to do that. We just had a session on the release of Book 12 at TMEA last weekend. Tim Lotzenheiser and Andy Traxel, who's our new editor, and I, along with Daniel Cook as our moderator. It came about like a lot of things do, an early morning meeting in a small room at Midwest with bad donuts from the hotel. And Tim Lotzenheiser approached me and said, look, we've been talking about this, several of us have been talking about it, and want to ask if you'd be interested in coming to this meeting. We've got a couple music educators involved. We've got a really great high school pedagogue involved. We've got Ray Kramer involved. we have a really good team, and we want to talk about the possibility of this idea. And so I said, oh, count me in. I'll be happy to be there. So I think Ray and I were there kind of to represent the high Indiana and North Texas, the high end of, and Cincinnati. Well, it wasn't North Texas, excuse me, the high end of performance. And we had Richard Miles and our editor there, who were music educator PhDs. And we had Ed Lisk, who was, a great pedagogue, had great bands, high school bands, and
so influential
in New York. And so we're all talking about the fact that we think that the publishers have too much to do with what we buy, and that we ought to be more conscientious about determining the repertoire we play.
Yeah.
And rather than just, oh, that's the same color cover of the one that was so good last year, I'll give that a try. And
Right.
I don't know if you remember Václav Nelibel, but all of his music came in an orange cover with a black title, and just the cover used to sell his music,
Right.
After Tritico and Symphonic Movement, great pieces. Everything popped. So we had a long talk, and we said we came up with kind of a concept where we would have a book that would have recommended pieces. That came from a lot of us going to festivals, listening to bands play that were extraordinary, but weren't playing the right music.
Right.
And we'd write, gee, it'd be great if this is such a great band, you've done such great teaching. It'd be great if you could play some of the important wind band pieces. And so people would come up to us afterwards in various settings and say, well, what should I play? And I learned to carry a list with me of about 200 pieces. I said, well, anything on this list. And that was a list made up of lists from Frank Battisti, Bob Reynolds, John Painter, Bill Rovelli. It goes on and on. I was a list collector, David Whitwell. So we said, well, why don't we put a book together that might have study guides in it, so that would help direct the teacher towards some background information, maybe an analysis that's not in depth, but one that would get them started in their work on the piece. And we talked about that. And then we talked about, well, should it be all grade 6 pieces, or what should we do? And we came up with this idea of 100 pieces in each book, grades 2 through 6, with 20 pieces in each grade level. And no composer repeated at first, because you could fill the book grade 2s and 3s with Frank Erickson.
Right.
Or with Claire Grunman. Or so people got really mad. Well, how come there's only one Claire Grunman piece? Well, that's because there's going to be more books.
Yeah.
And they'll be in it later. How could you leave out the whole? Well, we didn't leave it out. It's in another book. So Tim set out. We agreed. Let's see if we can sell this to anybody. So Tim sets out at Midwest, going to publishers, their booths, and talking to them about the idea. Everybody's saying no. Well, everybody would ask this question: how many of our publications are going to be in the book?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And we would say, well, maybe none, or maybe a lot. We can't tell you, because it's going to be a wide open list. Nobody was interested, given that framework, until he hit GIA, Alec Harris, Gregorian Institute of America, who published Catholic religious music. Right, the most part at the time. He hadn't become the music ed mogul that he is now. He said, sounds good to me. Let's do it. And thank goodness for Alec, because it meant we had total freedom to really consider pieces. And we never looked at the publisher in any of them. It was pretty much blind. It was more about, is this a piece that can work? And is this a piece we can support?
Yeah, and which, from an educational standpoint or from a performance standpoint, I think that's the approach that we as conductors with our ensembles, whether we're teaching a 7th grade band or we're teaching a high school band or a college band or community band, are we putting quality repertoire in front of our ensembles? Are we really drawing the most out of that and leaving that legacy for the band community and for the community at large, and showing people that it's much more than what you may hear along the way,
Yeah. And if you followed it, it's exploded, in terms of
Yeah.
music through performance in orchestra, teaching music through performance in jazz, teaching music through performance in choir. And what I'd say about the grading, any list is opinion, you know.
Right.
But we're now up to book 12 with 100 pieces in each book. That's 1,200 pieces. And that's a lot of music and a lot of study guides and a lot of contributions by a lot of great musicians and teachers at public school level and university level, and composers who've written about their own pieces. But interestingly, you know, people will say, well, gosh, your grade 2 is awfully hard, or your grade 3 is awfully easy. Depends on where you are and depends on the room you're in. And the final arbiter in all of this is the conductor. You know, it might be a grade 2, but if it has a solo English horn part and you don't have any double reed players, write it out for saxophone and play it anyway, is what I would do. But the fact is that it's a suggestion, and we figure now with so many pieces that there's plenty of opportunity to find great literature. When I started teaching, the only literature I knew is what I played in school and what Fred Fennell was recording.
Right.
So
right, and thank God for him. I mean, that's those recordings that he did with Eastman. I mean, it really paved the way for all of us, you know. Now, I did want to. Josh and I were having a conversation about the grading of music, and Josh, go ahead and come back on, and because we were talking about this as band directors, and quite often we get caught up in sticking with a particular grade level, depending on the ensemble that we have. And Josh, speak a little bit about what you were saying about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that so when we're trying to plan for our ensembles, we find ourselves, let's say we're preparing for adjudication, we're preparing for MPA, and then it comes time to, all right, it's our upper level ensemble. Let's look at the grade 6 list because this is what we're doing, and there's this great music. But sometimes the kids, and maybe it's a reflection of us as a teacher, not seeing us in our best light. But if it's not on that grade 6 list, they have such a hard time saying, well, this is worth my time. If it's not 6, I'm not going to do it. And then we ask ourselves, are we really using this grading list appropriately? If I'm looking at the list and I've got this piece that's going to go great. I want to do something that's lyrical and emotive, but I'm not touching Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to contest with that piece. I'd love to do, we were talking about some of the Tekeli folk tune arrangements, but they're sitting in grade 4. So, as teachers, as pedagogues, how do we balance this? We have to pick something within this category, but at the same time, the category and the system of it is an imperfect science.
Right. Well, and especially if you're having to choose it for a festival, or you're, an evaluative panel of some sort that's going to award rankings or whatever. I don't know what to tell you about that, except that, you're looking at a person who's probably recorded more grade 2 and 3 band music than anybody on the face of the earth. I mean, when Alex said, gee, would recordings go along with this? And I said, well, sure they would. And he said, okay, what do we do? The 4s, the 5s, and the 6s? I said, absolutely not. We got to do the 2s and 3s because there's no recordings of those. You can find a lot of, and thank goodness, you can find a lot of great recordings of the whole suites. But, the Red Balloon, played by people who actually rehearsed it and put it together, or any number of other pieces that are so wonderful, I thought it was really important that we do that. So we divided that process into doing the 2s and 3s one summer, and then the grade 4s the next summer, leaving the 5s and 6s to the Marine Band or to whoever, Northwestern, all the people who are recording those pieces. So we, but I would say this about recording 2s and 3s with doctoral and master's wannabe students. great musicians, some of whom end up in the San Francisco Symphony and the complete trumpet section of the Army Field Band. Every euphonium player in Washington, D.C. pretty much has gone through our school. So they loved that music. And it was a way we could tell if the music was very good or not, because it was challenging. It's much harder to record an easy piece than it is to record a hard piece, because you can hide in a hard piece.
Right.
But in a grade 2 and 3 piece, you're pretty much, everything that's there can be heard. And I would have players come up to me and say, this is really pretty good music. They're kind of surprised after going through a summer of grade 2s and 3s. But I would say all music is difficult, it seems to me. And, it's good to have something very challenging that you're working on, but not every piece has to be a project piece.
Right.
And, you can talk about the importance of lyricism and just getting to do what you do so well without having to worry about it. Just naturally make music together. And that's why we play some pieces that aren't technically always as hard as you might think they would be.
You bring up a great point there, because a band can play the notes, can they truly play the music? And there's so many of those beautiful lyrical things that get lost in just the technical aspect of things. So sometimes it really pays off to take a piece that's not technically challenged to really develop that musical aspect and the flow and the beauty of it.
Yeah, I've got a great story in regard to that. We had David Maslanka on campus several years ago, and we were doing one of his pieces. And I believe he was asked while he was on campus and around, a junior high band asked him to come. They had learned one of his pieces. And I can't remember what the piece was, but they had learned it, and he went and coached it, and they played it technically quite well. And when he got back, he was talking to my WinLit class, and he said, I don't really know how I felt about hearing that band play my piece. He said, when you see, this is exactly what he said, when you see these beauty contests for 5-year-old little girls, and they're all dressed up in makeup and clothes they probably shouldn't be wearing for another 10 or 15 years. That's kind of how I felt. And I thought, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, that was they were kind of taught to do it. They didn't understand it. And,
right.
But that doesn't mean, because I've heard great high school performances of movements from the Dahl Sinfonietta or the Hindemus Symphony, or even Prague, or even Schwanner's Mountains, right? I've heard it happen. So it's all about the teacher and how you come to it. But it's not just about getting the notes. You have to get the soul behind the piece, and it takes a great teacher to do that, at any level.
Yeah. So to kind of transition a little bit, I wanted to play for everybody and us to kind of talk through it as we listen to it. We've got a recording of the Shostakovich Festive Overture. And tell us a little bit about this recording that you guys did, because unlike, the recording projects that you guys did, this is a live performance.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would say all recording projects are live. Now, I had mentioned to you that our future isn't found in the orchestra's past, but this is one of those transcriptions. This is one of those transcriptions that we play because it works for both.
Yeah. Right.
And it's an amazing transcription by Donald Hunsberger. With a killer euphonium part. And of course, Hans is a euphonium player. And so the parts are just, my euphonium players light up when they get to play stuff like this. Yeah. So I instrumented this for this particular concert with just about everybody we have in the pool. And this thing is always fun to do. I remember playing the clarinet solo for Bill Ravelli when he was a guest conductor at our college. It was...
By the way, this young man does a fantastic job.
Yes, he does. Undergraduate.
Oh, really? Even better. That's awesome.
Great player. And I remember when Ravelli, Dr. Ravelli was coming to Cal State Long Beach, and we were playing this, and Reynolds prepared us, and we start, of course, and we get to the clarinet solo, and he stops, and he looks at me and he says, play that again, please. And I played it. I said, okay, stand up and play it. I stood up and I played it. He says, go over there and play it. And he points to some other, I go over there and I play it. And he kind of nodded, didn't say much. I sat back down, let's play it one more time. And every time I played it, I stared him right in the eye. I didn't look at my music. I just looked right at him. Okay, we moved on. A little bit later, he stops the rehearsal and he points at me again and says, why did I stop? And I said, well, we were having some phasing problems between the brass and the woodwinds. I said, right. Put my horn back up. He goes, specifically, where was the problem? Measure 17 or whatever.
Right.
Back up again, saying, I hope to God he leaves me alone. Then he goes one more time. He says, who was ahead? I said, the trumpets were rushing at measure 17. And he points at me and he says really loud, this man is listening. But after he'd done that, you can bet everybody else in the band was listening.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to answer any question he might have about what we were doing. And the whole rehearsal just went up a notch in terms of everybody, oh my God, he's going to ask me next. Kind of
right.
But I love this piece because it gives everybody a chance to fly. And, you know, you try and play it as fast as you can. That's kind of the game. And it's just a powerful piece. It works for the brass, it works for the woodwinds, wonderful euphonium lines.
Yeah.
And clarinet euphonium unison lines that are almost impossible, but somehow you get through them. Right. And this was one of the last things we did before we got shut down. This was on the same concert that we did Winds of McWall, I believe.
Okay.
By Cole.
Now, how long does it take for you to put something like this together? How long did you rehearse the piece, and how many rehearsals before you guys actually?
We would have, I believe I had 10 rehearsals because I knew I was going to record some of this music on this concert. And we probably had 5 pieces on the concert. So each piece gets, our rehearsals are about just a little shy of 3 hours.
Okay.
Typical symphony orchestra length. And so we get, I don't know, total time on a piece. This piece we probably put 30 minutes in once a week. So
gotcha.
2.5 hours.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So now, have you recorded this on one of your albums?
No.
I didn't think so. I was
No.
So maybe transitioning a little bit. This hasn't shown up on one of your albums that you've done, but YouTube has opened up the door for in so many ways. How do you see stuff like this really impact? And by the way, I want to pause real quick because I just wanted to make a comment right here. So right there in the bass clarinet section, we got an empty chair. And as a high school band director, I just got to say, I just feel so good that even the great North Texas has that one bass clarinet player that cannot remember the concert date and the concert time. I know it's a joke. You guys switch out during the things, but I just had to say that it was a joke. But how do you see YouTube kind of, or Spotify or any of those things changing what we do?
It's huge. And in fact, I would say about sadly, we stopped doing recordings for the the Teaching Music project because people quit buying them. And we got to book 10 and that was it. So book 11 and 12, we've not made recordings for it. But we have a new idea. And I'll throw this out to the people watching. We're thinking of making a YouTube series that has us playing the grade 2s and 3s, but you get an hour of each piece. You'd get 45 minutes to watch the rehearsal process on that piece, and then a performance of it at the end. And we would devote one concert cycle to getting all the 2s and 3s done. And maybe we'd do a half-hour rehearsal. It would probably depend on the time out. But then you could access a video, and so could your students, of it being played. more and more students want to see the music as well as hear the music.
Right.
And that's because we've been asking ourselves, well, how can we keep contributing to this 2-3 world? How can we help? That's an idea we have. And once again, once we come back, hopefully next August, we'll be able to take a cycle and do that for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And give, have something that can be used by people. I don't know how Alec
that's actually a really cool idea, because I think all of us would, as band directors, would love to see a rehearsal in progress, and I mean, as a band director, it would be intriguing to me to kind of see the things that you do to draw out the music out of your band.
Yeah, and we of course would have to work fast. It wouldn't be realistic in terms of how a teacher in a classroom might use it, but at least they could hear it come from the sight reading of it through to making it good enough to say, okay, that we're out of time, here we go. Which is really what happens to all of us with concerts. We always need one more rehearsal. We're always out of time too soon. But I'm hopeful that we can convince Alec, the publisher, president of the company, to buy into this, because we could do it for almost nothing on campus. We have a really great video set up, and we just have to organize getting on stage. But anyway, it's a thought. But
no, it's a great idea.
YouTube, I think seeing it's really important. I think that's the way it's going to go in the future.
Yeah,
and we've put out we put out a lot of recordings on YouTube.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we've covered a lot of ground tonight. We've talked about where we came from as a band community, the history of us, moving through to the impact that Fennell had with those recordings of the Eastman Wind Ensemble, to your huge contribution to the recording element. And now we're seeing the advent of YouTube and the video recording and the interaction there. And I can't help but think that in some ways this is a full circle to what bands would have been in the time of Gilmore or the time of Sousa, where the whole community would come together to watch these magnificent bands perform. And now we're doing that. It's just that we're doing it in a virtual setting. I mean, we're having our town halls, our community centers are now the YouTubes of the world.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to hear really good players make a mistake now and then, and realize that that happens.
They're human.
Yeah, stuff happens, and it's not about being perfect. It's about doing your best and expressing yourself, being creative with your work, and it happens to everybody. I've never been to a perfect Chicago Symphony concert.
Yeah,
and I don't know that I'd want to go to a perfect one. I think it's about walking off stage when you're done, feeling elated that you sent the message of the music to an audience.
Yeah.
And I think YouTube's a really good way to do that. Think about this. In the old days, I can remember, like I'd be playing a piece, say by Warren Benson. So I'd want to get input. So I'd send Warren a cassette of our rehearsal. That would take a week to get to him. Then he'd put it in his tape recorder and talk over my performance or rehearsal and tell me what I'm doing wrong and what I should work on. Then he'd send it back to me. That would take another week, maybe 2. So now 3 weeks have gone by. You've got only a week left, or maybe 2, to make all those changes. Today, a world premiere can happen on Wednesday night, and everybody can be seeing it on Thursday morning. It's incredible how quickly the repertoire gets pushed out.
Yeah.
And we're given an opportunity to hear it and see it in action. It just overnight now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Maestro, we've come up to 9 o'clock, and I told you I would not keep you longer than an hour, and I want to honor that. But so before we go, what is the next step for you? What is happening in the near future for you guys?
Well, assuming we can go. I'm teaching remotely. We were talking about that earlier. I'm teaching
Yeah.
remotely right now. I'm out in California, and I'll be headed back to Denton in August with any luck, and I think that's going to work. And we'll go. What we're going to do is pick up right where we left off. I had two really big projects on the burner that we didn't get to record a year ago.
Okay.
So we missed this year as well. So that's on our docket, and putting those back together, it's pretty important. And then we have our oboe and bassoon teachers have retired since we all left, and we're in the process of final stages of interviews. I've got oboe interviews the rest of this week, actually.
Yeah.
So on our first concert, I know we're going to do the Royal Fireworks with 24 oboes and 24 bassoons, 3 contrabassoons, 3 double basses, timpani, and 9 trumpets.
That's
and
amazing.
We're going to bring our oboe teacher and bassoon teacher back, who retired, and we'll have a night in their honor. Maybe play the Hillsong #1 of Percy Granger along with that, so that we get a lot of double reed madness that night.
Yeah.
And then there's so many pieces that I've been tracking since we shut down, and I've got a long list of things I'd like to do next year. So it's just going to be a matter of seeing how they fit, and not too much new, not too much old. My programming mantra is something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and a march.
I do.
And that's what we're going to look for, and try and put some concerts together that somebody might watch on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting those latest recording projects once they come available, and I'm really looking forward to the Royal Fireworks. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Maestro Corporon, thank you so much for joining us for the Maestro Moments. It's been an absolute pleasure, an absolute joy, and we just thank you so much for it.
Well, thank you for having me, and to all of you that are out there standing on the box and working so hard to help students express themselves and be musical and experience music and love music and keep music in their lives. Thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think the closer you are to when students start, the more influence you have on them. And at least that's been the case in my life. So thank you for all that you do as music educators, and for on a night off, for sitting around talking about more wind band stuff. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.